The alien invaders scanned Earth's surface, confident in their victory. Humans were weak, defenseless, and primitive, or so they thought. Commander Vokter stood at the command deck of the Zalari mothership, gazing down at the blue-green planet below. A planet filled with fragile creatures that lacked the strength, intelligence, or technology to resist what was coming. "This will be over before it begins," he muttered, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Deploy the ground forces. Secure the capital cities. Ensure there is no resistance." The Zalari warships descended into the atmosphere, their sleek black hulls blotting out the sun. Thousands of armored soldiers, towering over 8 feet tall, landed in the heart of human civilization. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy. Their armor was impenetrable. And yet, something felt wrong. Commander Vokter watched the live feed from his officers on the ground. Humans had gathered in the streets, not screaming, not running in fear, but standing there. Watching. No military forces had mobilized to stop them. No nuclear strikes, no desperate counterattacks. The Zalari had encountered countless species before, and every single one of them fought until the bitter end. Yet here, on Earth, nothing. One of his officers, General Tar, barked into his communicator. "Why aren't they resisting? Are they surrendering?" A static-filled response came through. "No signs of surrender. They're just waiting." Vokter narrowed his eyes. Waiting? For what? The first wave of soldiers moved in, weapons raised, expecting an easy subjugation. But then, the humans disappeared. Vanished into the streets. Into buildings. Into the underground tunnels they called subways. The aliens found themselves walking into empty cities. A chill ran down Vokter's spine. This was not the behavior of a weak species. His officer's voice crackled through the communicator again, this time, filled with unease. "Sir. I think we made a mistake." Before Vokter could respond, something unexpected happened. The power across the Zalari ships shut down. Flickering screens. Failing weapons. The mighty war machines of the Zalari, their invincible technology, stopped working. Then, across every communication channel, a single message played on repeat. A human voice. Calm, confident, and chilling in its simplicity. "Welcome to Earth." Commander Vokter's mandibles tightened. This was not what he had expected. The humans weren't weak. They weren't scared. They were ready. And, for the first time in his long career of conquest, Vokter felt fear. Commander Vokter's eyes flickered across the failing command screens. Warnings flashed in every sector of their invasion fleet. Energy levels dropping. Communications disrupted. Weapons offline. This was impossible. "Report," he barked, his voice a sharp crack through the chaos. A junior officer, pale and trembling, struggled to respond. "Yes, sir, something is interfering with our systems. Our warships are going dark." Vokter clenched his mandibles. "That's absurd. No primitive race can disable our technology. Find the source and neutralize it, immediately." But the problem wasn't coming from one source. It was everywhere. The battle that wasn't. On the ground, General Tar and his battalion of heavily armored Zalari soldiers moved through the abandoned city streets. Their target was clear, the human capital. Yet, something was wrong. No civilians. No soldiers. No signs of life. Only silence. A soldier scanned the area. "Thermal readings show movement in the buildings, sir. But no clear signatures. It's like they're hiding." "Hiding? From us?" Tar scoffed. "These creatures are weaker than a Zalari hatchling. Move forward. Take control of their centers of power. They pressed on, weapons drawn. Their mission was simple: seize the government, disable any resistance, and declare Zolari rule. But as they advanced, the streets narrowed. Buildings loomed higher, shadows stretching across their path. They were being funneled into a choke point. Then, crash! A massive construction beam tumbled down from a rooftop, crushing 2 soldiers instantly. More debris rained from above. It wasn't an accident. It's a trap, one of the soldiers yelled. From the alleyways and hidden corners of the city, humans emerged. Not in military uniforms, not with advanced weapons, but with intelligence, coordination, and an understanding of their terrain. The Zolari fired their weapons, or tried to. The energy rifles, once unstoppable instruments of war, failed to respond. General Tar looked at his rifle in disbelief. It was completely dead. Then, from the rooftops, a voice rang out, clear, calm, and filled with amusement. "Looks like you didn't do your homework, big guy." Tar turned sharply, scanning for the source. A lone human stood on a balcony above, arms crossed. "Captain Reynolds. I hope you weren't planning to use those fancy weapons of yours," Reynolds continued. "Because we figured out how to shut them off before you even landed." Tar's mandibles flared. "You interfered with our technology?" Reynolds shrugged. "Let's just say we got a little creative. You came in thinking we'd fight on your terms. Big mistake." From the rooftops, humans dropped smoke canisters. Thick clouds spread through the streets. The Zolari, unable to see, unable to fire their weapons, found themselves completely disoriented. Then the attacks began, not with brute force, but with tactics. Tripwires. Traps. Precision strikes. The Zolari were being hunted. Within minutes, half of Tar's forces were incapacitated, not by soldiers, but by civilians. Captured. Helpless. And worst of all, humiliated. The fear sets in. Back on the Zolari mothership, Commander Wachter watched the feed in stunned silence. He saw his warriors, his proud, genetically superior warriors, being outmaneuvered by creatures half their size. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. A new message flashed across the screen. Incoming transmission. Wachter hesitated, then opened the channel. A human face appeared. Dr. Ellis. A scientist. A non-combatant. Yet the way she looked at him sent a chill through his bones. "Commander Wachter," she said smoothly. "I imagine you have some questions." Wachter's mandibles tightened. "How are you disabling our technology?" Ellis tilted her head. "That's the wrong question. The real question is, why did we let you land in the first place?" Wachter's stomach sank. The humans had let them land. They hadn't resisted because they didn't need to. They had already won before the battle began. The transmission cut out. And at that moment, Wachter felt something he had never felt before in his entire career of conquest. Fear. Commander Wachter paced inside the dimly lit command chamber of the Zolari mothership. His warriors, his unstoppable warriors, had been humiliated by humans. The reports came in one after another. Entire platoons lost. Squads vanishing without a trace. The humans weren't fighting with brute force, they were playing with their minds. The thought unsettled him. How? How are they doing this? The Zolari had crushed countless civilizations, from the towering Gorthan warlords to the mind-bending Creel. Yet here, on this fragile blue planet, their forces were crumbling. A new report flashed on his screen. Captured Zolari troops, 78% confirmed neutralized. Energy weapons, still offline. Emergency retreat, requested by ground command. Wachter's mandibles twitched. A retreat? The word was poison. The humans hadn't just outmaneuvered them. They had broken them. No. Unacceptable. Vokter slammed a fist onto the control panel. There had to be a reason for this failure. And the Zalari only had one way to find answers. Interrogation. The experiment. Inside a heavily secured Zalari research chamber, a single human sat inside a containment cell. Sergeant Daniel Carter. Captured during an ambush, he had been stripped of his gear, surrounded by glowing energy restraints. The Zalari scientists observed him through reinforced glass. He should have been afraid. He should have been begging for his life. But he wasn't. Carter smiled. The lead scientist, Corval, hissed in irritation. This one doesn't behave like the others. Commander Vokter loomed behind the observation panel, his arms crossed. Then we will make him behave. Corval nodded and activated the analysis machine. A bright beam of energy scanned Carter's body, mapping his biology, his neural activity, his genetic structure. And then... alarm. Corval jumped back as the machine sparked and fizzled. The screen flickered erratically before stabilizing, showing something impossible. Carter wasn't normal. His biology was chaos. His brainwaves fluctuated wildly, shifting between calm and hyper-aware in an instant. His muscle fibers showed impossible regeneration rates. His pain tolerance was off the charts. Vokter's eyes narrowed. What does this mean? Corval hesitated. It means, humans aren't just adaptable. They are unstable. Their bodies can endure extreme trauma, extreme conditions, and still keep fighting. Vokter stared at the data. That's impossible. Carter chuckled from inside the containment cell. He had been listening. Not impossible, he said. Just human. Vokter turned sharply toward him. Explain. Carter leaned forward, his grin widening. You thought we were weak because we don't have claws or fangs. Because we don't have thick armor. But you missed something important. He gestured toward himself. We survive. No matter what. Silence. Carter tilted his head, watching their reactions. We're not the strongest. We're not the smartest. But we adapt. We suffer. We endure. His grin turned into something darker, something unsettling. And that scares you, doesn't it? Corval's mandibles twitched. Nonsense. Your species is primitive. You don't even have interstellar travel. Carter smirked. Yeah. And yet here we are. You came to conquer us, and now you're afraid of us. Vokter's jaw tightened. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to dismiss this as arrogance. But the truth was written in the data. The Zalari had always won because their enemies followed patterns. Every species had a breaking point. But humans? They didn't break the way they were supposed to. Vokter turned to his officers. Double security. No more risks. He turned back to Carter. You may be different. But in the end, you are still trapped here. Carter's grin never wavered. Vokter stepped out of the chamber, his mind swirling. As the doors sealed shut, Carter leaned back, completely at ease. Because he knew something Vokter didn't. He wasn't the one trapped. Commander Vokter stared at the command console in silence. His reflection glared back at him from the darkened screen. His forces, his elite, battle-hardened warriors, were losing. Not in a traditional sense. Not in the way he understood war. There were no massive explosions, no grand battles where superior firepower crushed the weaker foe. Instead, the Zalari were vanishing. One by one, his squads were cut off from communications. His soldiers weren't returning from their patrols. The ones who did weren't the same. They spoke in hushed voices. Their mandibles twitched. Their eyes darted from shadow to shadow, as if expecting an attack at any moment. Vokter had never seen fear in his species before. Now, it was spreading like a disease. The fracture begins. On the Zalari mothership, General Tar stormed into the command center, his fists clenched in fury. His armor was scratched, his breathing heavy. He had barely escaped the trap the humans had set in the city below. "They are toying with us," he snarled. "We should eradicate them all." Vokter didn't turn from the screen. "With what weapons, Tar?" Tar hesitated. Vokter slowly turned to face him. "Our weapons are still offline. Our troops are being picked apart. Every battle we engage in is not a battle at all, it's a lesson. And the lesson is this: we are outmatched." Tar recoiled. "Outmatched? By them? You are letting fear infect your mind." Vokter's voice was cold. "Fear is not an infection. It is an alarm. And I hear it ringing loud and clear." The command center fell into silence. Then, a scream. All heads turned to a Zalari officer near the back of the room. His hands trembled, his eyes wide. He had been reviewing the field reports, until he saw something that made his blood freeze. Vokter stepped forward. "What is it?" The officer struggled to find his words. Instead, he turned the screen so everyone could see. A recording. The feed was from a Zalari patrol unit, one of the last ones that had gone out. The video was shaky, distorted, but clear enough. It showed a group of human civilians. Unarmed. Surrounded by Zalari troops. Then, something changed. The humans looked at them. No fear. No hesitation. Then they smiled. One by one, the Zalari troops dropped their weapons. They backed away. The camera feed cut to black. There was no gunfire. No struggle. Just a simple, unexplainable breakdown. General Tar's voice was barely a whisper. "They are breaking us, without firing a single shot." Vokter's claws dug into the console. This was worse than defeat. This was unraveling. The confession. The containment chamber was silent except for the faint hum of the force field. Inside, Sergeant Daniel Carter sat on the floor, looking as relaxed as if he were in his own living room. Across from him, in a separate containment cell, sat a Zalari soldier. One of their own, but he was different. He trembled. His eyes darted around. His mandibles twitched uncontrollably. He had been captured by humans. And now, he wasn't the same. Commander Vokter stood outside the cell, watching. Observing. This was his own soldier. A warrior who had been raised from birth to be fearless. And yet, when the Zalari scientist approached to examine him, the soldier flinched. Carter exhaled, watching the scene unfold. "You want to know what's happening to your people?" Vokter's eyes locked onto him. "Speak." Carter leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You came here thinking we were just another species to conquer. That we'd fall in line like the rest. But you never stopped to ask why we're still here." Vokter said nothing. Carter smirked. "Let me give you a history lesson. You see, we don't break. We should. We should have collapsed long ago. We should have been wiped out by war, famine, disease. We should have died out. But we didn't." He spread his arms. "Every species you've conquered had a breaking point. You find it, you press hard enough, and they shatter." Carter's expression darkened. "But humans? We don't break. We bend. We bleed. We suffer. But we get back up. And that's what scares you, isn't it?" Vokter remained still. But inside, something shifted. His own people were crumbling. The Zalari were powerful. But their strength came from control. And what happens when the ones you seek to control refuse to play by the rules? They thought humans were helpless. But now? Now they saw the truth. Vokter turned to his officers. His voice was quiet, measured. We need to consider an alternative approach. Tar's eyes widened. You're talking about surrender. Vokter's gaze didn't waver. Perhaps, for the first time in Zalari history, we need to ask what happens when the invaders become the defeated. Tar's breathing was heavy, his fists clenched. We cannot surrender. We must. Beep. An urgent transmission interrupted him. Vokter turned sharply to the main screen. A new message had been intercepted. Unknown signal detected. Origin, deep space. Message content, we see you. Silence. Carter raised an eyebrow. Huh. That's new. Vokter's blood ran cold. Because the Zalari weren't alone. Something else had been watching. Something worse. The command center of the Zalari mothership was silent. No one spoke. No one moved. The message glowed on the main screen. Unknown signal detected. Origin, deep space. Message content, we see you. The words sent a chill through Commander Vokter's bones. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity was no longer his primary concern. He turned to his officers, his voice sharp. Source? The transmission officer hesitated. It's coming from deep space, Commander. Beyond any known system. It's old, but the message just activated. Vokter's mind raced. This wasn't a coincidence. The Zalari had invaded countless worlds, but no transmission like this had ever been detected. It had only appeared after their forces landed on Earth. Something had been waiting for them. A realization hit him. What if Earth wasn't just another world? What if this planet was being watched? The enemy of my enemy? In the Zalari containment cell, Sergeant Carter sat up straighter. He could sense the shift in the air. The aliens were nervous. He smirked. Let me guess. You just heard something you really, really wish you hadn't. Commander Vokter entered the chamber, his expression unreadable. Carter leaned back, crossing his arms. So, what's it gonna be, Commander? You're finally realizing that maybe, just maybe, you picked the wrong species to mess with? Vokter studied him. The humans were unpredictable, yes. Dangerous, even. But this new development? This was beyond their war. We received a signal, Vokter admitted. Something, ancient. Something that sees both of us. Carter's smirk faded slightly. Yeah, that's never good. Vokter took a step closer. You knew, didn't you? Carter sighed. Not exactly. But I had a feeling. Vokter's eyes narrowed. Explain. Carter exhaled. You aliens think we're primitive, right? You assume we're weak because we don't have interstellar fleets, because we fight with desperation instead of overwhelming power. He leaned forward. But you never stopped to ask why. Vokter said nothing. Carter continued. Humans? We don't expand the way other species do. We don't reach for the stars as quickly as we should. We fight each other, sure, but we've always had this nagging feeling, like we're not alone. Vokter's mandibles twitched. You're saying Earth was left alone on purpose. Carter nodded. And now? You kicked the wrong nest, pal. Vokter clenched his fists. He turned to his officers. We need full scans of the system. Now. Something worse. Across the Zalari fleet, scanners activated, reaching beyond Earth's atmosphere. Searching. Hunting. What they found made no sense. A massive structure drifted at the edges of the solar system. It wasn't human. It wasn't Zalari. It had been there for centuries. Watching. Waiting. And now, it was waking up. Vokter's officer whispered, "Commander, we have movement." On the screen, the deep space anomaly shifted. A new message flashed across their communications array. "You were warned." The Zalari bridge fell into stunned silence. Vokter clenched his jaw. "Prepare the fleet. If we must face this, we do so together." General Tar growled. "You can't mean." Vokter turned sharply. "The humans are not our priority anymore. This is." Tar's mandibles twitched in frustration, but he said nothing. Carter, still sitting in his containment cell, grinned. Well. Looks like we're on the same side now." Vokter scowled. "Don't mistake this for friendship, human." Carter shrugged. "Oh, I wouldn't dream of it. But let's be honest, you need us." Vokter didn't reply. Because he knew it was true. The Zalari warfleet hung in orbit, their sleek black ships poised like silent sentinels above Earth. Below them, humanity stood ready, not with brute force, but with something far more dangerous. Uncertainty. And now, something else was moving. The deep space structure at the edge of the solar system had activated. Its surface shimmered as if awakening from a long slumber. A new transmission came through. "You were warned." Commander Vokter gripped the edge of the control console, his mandibles tightening. "What in the name of the void have we disturbed?" Sergeant Carter's voice crackled over the communication feed. He was still confined to the Zalari mothership, but he sounded completely calm. "Well, Commander, looks like you're about to learn the first rule of Earth." Vokter turned sharply. "And what is that?" Carter's voice was steady. "There's always something bigger." The awakening. The unknown object drifted closer. It was not a ship. It was not a station. It was something else. The Zalari fleet scanners struggled to identify it. No life signs. No clear structure. Just a massive construct, pulsing with an eerie golden glow. Then, without warning, it moved. Faster than light, faster than thought. One moment it was distant, the next it was right above them. The lights aboard the Zalari ships flickered. A strange resonance filled the air. A deep, almost mechanical hum that sank into their bones. And then, a voice. Ancient. Cold. Beyond comprehension. They should have stayed hidden. The truth revealed. Inside the Zalari command center, Vokter and his officers stared at the screen in horror. Carter, watching from his containment cell, leaned forward. "You hear that, Commander? That's not directed at us." Vokter's claws dug into the console. "Then who?" Carter's smile faded. "Us. Humans." Vokter's head snapped toward him. Carter exhaled. "I told you, didn't I? We've had this feeling for centuries. Like something was watching. Like something was keeping us contained." He shook his head. "And now? You idiots woke it up." The golden structure pulsed again. The transmission officer gasped. "Commander. New readings. It's not an object. It's a weapon." Vokter's breath stilled. Carter clenched his fists. "Yeah. And it ain't ours." The deep voice spoke again. "The experiment has failed. Termination protocol, engaged." The Zalari officers froze. Vokter's mind raced. What experiment?" Carter inhaled sharply. Then, realization dawned on him. He muttered, "Oh, hell." Vokter turned to him. "You know." Carter nodded. "Not everything. But enough. He exhaled. Commander, listen to me very carefully. That thing? It ain't here for you. It's here for us. The realization. The Zalari officers turned to their leader, waiting for orders. Vokter looked at the human in front of him. Carter's face was serious now. This was no longer a war between them. This was something bigger. Tell me what you know, Vokter demanded. Carter nodded. Here's my theory, Earth wasn't left alone by chance. We were being observed. Contained. He gestured to the golden structure outside. That thing? It's not attacking. It's judging. Carter clenched his fists. And it just decided that we're too dangerous to be left alive. Vokter's mind reeled. The humans were different from every species the Zalari had encountered. Their survival instincts. Their resilience. Their refusal to break. And now, something older, something greater, had deemed them a mistake. Vokter inhaled. Then, made his choice. We fight. Tar stepped forward. Commander, this is not our battle. It is now, Vokter growled. His eyes locked onto Carter. Human, he said. You once claimed your species does not break. Carter smirked. That's right. Vokter's mandibles clicked. Then prove it. Carter grinned. Now you're speaking my language.